everyone, this is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 256 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what is going on with you?
Hey, man, I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. You and I have a lot out right now.
We do.
On TCAT, we actually headed to Iran.
We did.
To talk about serial killer Saeed Hanai. You know, this was a guy who murdered 16 sex workers because he believed he was on a religious crusade to cleanse the world of what he called impure people.
Yeah.
I think what was scary about that one is he had a list of about 80 more people that he didn't get to.
That he was planning to.
That he was planning on getting to. We also have a brand new Patreon episode out that drops Saturday night on Edward Yates, a dad who murdered his former son-in-law and then used kind of a quirky defense that he was too overweight to have been able to commit the murder.
Yeah, it couldn't have been me because I'm overweight. I can't do that kind of stuff.
No, couldn't carry out the actions necessary. Gibbs, before we jump into this episode, let's give our shout outs. For Patreon, we had Harry with an I.
Hey, Harry.
Peter Rothfeld.
What's going on, Peter?
Stacy Tozier.
Hey, thanks, Tozier.
Ashley Hunt.
What's up, Ashley?
Bree Matthews.
Hey, Bree.
Melissa Beasley.
Well, thanks, Melissa.
Elaine.
Well, good old Elaine.
Don Herzig.
What's up, Herzig?
Bruce Mills.
Hey, Bruce.
Melissa Mays.
What's up, Melissa?
Catherine Knop.
Look at that. Knop. I like that.
Lynn.
Hey, Lynn.
Casey Weaver.
Well, thank you, Casey.
Holly Kucharski.
What's up, Kucharski?
Thomas.
Hey, Thomas.
MCF.
What's up, MCF?
Beth Ann Cadwallader.
Well, thank you, Beth Ann.
And last but not least, Lindsay Young.
Awesome, Lindsay. Thanks.
And then if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Nick Maitland.
What's up, Nick?
So appreciate all the support we get. We also had some great PayPal donations from Dana Mackey.
Hey, Dana.
Jennifer Benson.
Thanks, Jennifer.
And Helen Ornelas.
Well, thank you, Helen.
So thanks to everyone. We really appreciate it. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I'm ready.
In this episode, we're talking about the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf. It was in the fall of 1944 that Georgette's body was discovered in her apartment in West Hollywood, California. The well-to-do socialite and heiress was beginning to make her way in the world. 20-year-old Georgette was a volunteer hostess at one of Los Angeles's iconic wartime entertainment venues, the Hollywood Canteen. But her young life was cut short when she was brutally raped, beaten, and asphyxiated. Fingerprints not belonging to Georgette were recovered from the crime scene, but despite the relatively large pool of potential suspects and the high-profile nature of the case, not a single person stood out as the possible killer. There was even speculation that Georgette's murder was linked to the infamous case of Elizabeth Short, which became known as the Black Dahlia murder. And that's a case that we covered probably years ago at this point.
Yeah, we did 2 episodes on it.
On True Crime All the Time Unsolved. Each person of interest in Georgette's case was carefully eliminated. So, when we talk about this case, it goes all the way back to 1944. Obviously, Gibbs, the passage of time hasn't made it any easier for the case to be solved. To this day, the killer's identity, motive, and really the circumstances under which he gained access to Georgette's home and even acquired the murder weapon remain the source of much speculation. Georgette Elise Bauerdorf was born on May 6, 1924 in New York City. Georgette and her older sister Connie grew up on the East Coast with their wealthy parents, George and Constance. Okay, makes sense to me. Your dad's name is George, you get named Georgette. Your mom's name is Constance, and you get named Connie.
Interesting how that works sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, parents like to have fun picking out their kids' names. Sometimes they want those names to reflect them, right? Or part of them. George Bauerdorf was a powerful oil executive and a Wall Street financier who had business interests spanning the country from Nevada to Texas down to Louisiana. And there's no doubt Georgette lived a privileged life. She attended private school and enjoyed trips to Europe with her family. When Constance died in 1935, 10-year-old Georgette and Connie moved across the country with their father to California. According to the Daily News, when Georgette graduated from high school in 1941, she decided to pursue a career as a newspaper reporter, starting with an entry-level job in the Women's Service Bureau at the Los Angeles Times. It was around this time that George remarried to his new wife, Thelma. The couple moved to Reno, Nevada, and Georgette and Connie moved into the family's 2-bedroom duplex apartment at the upscale El Palacio complex on Fountain Avenue in West Hollywood. So we got to think about, this time in history. World War II was in full swing. Americans everywhere were encouraged to do their part for the war effort. Charities campaigned for young women to fulfill roles in the entertainment industry to help boost morale for servicemen at home. So Georgette found herself a voluntary position as a hostess on Wednesday nights at a club called the Hollywood Canteen. It was co-founded by Betty Davis, and the Canteen opened in 1942. It was a popular venue for men in the armed forces. It offered meals, live music, and guest appearances by Hollywood stars such as Rita Hayworth and Marlene Dietrich. It was said, Gibbs, that they had about 100 hostesses working at this place, and it was pretty tough, pretty competitive to get one of these volunteer positions. Hostesses were thoroughly vetted. They even submitted their fingerprints to the FBI before they were hired and issued a photo ID. Basically, hostesses provided servicemen with good, clean fun. So we're talking about dancing and chatting.
Yeah.
Nothing, below board.
Just good old-fashioned fun.
Sure. And Georgette was proud of her role and soon became friendly with another hostess, 20-year-old June Ziegler, who also worked at the canteen on Wednesdays. In mid-June 1944, while she was working at the canteen, Georgette met a young anti-aircraft artillery trainee from Chicago, private named Jerry Brown. A few days after meeting Georgette, Jerry left for El Paso, Texas. From that time until Georgette's death, the two exchanged about 6 letters. And I think this was pretty common. Gibbs, you meet someone, you're about ready to go off, either to boot camp or to the war overseas. Hey, do you mind if I write you some letters? It was a big deal. I think for any serviceman to get a letter from somebody back in the States, and I think just to have somebody that you could write to and who would write you back, I think for a lot of those guys, it kind of kept them going, right? Something to look forward to.
Yeah. It's inspiration, motivation.
Yeah, a bunch of those shun words.
Yeah.
I get you. 2 months later, in late August 1944, Georgette's 24-year-old sister Connie moved back to the East Coast. So this left Georgette living alone in the Bauerdorf apartment. The Spanish-style building was set amongst well-manicured gardens, and the construction featured soundproof flooring and walls. Full-time caretakers Fred and Lulu Atwood also lived at the complex, and Connie left her car, a green 1936 Oldsmobile coupe, behind for Georgette to drive. So, I mean, we said it right up front, but there's no doubt there's a lot of money in this family, right? Her dad had money. He seemed to be pretty generous with it, with his kids. This sounds like a very, very nice apartment. You've got, some full-time caretakers. The one thing that kind of jumped out at me, because I know it's probably going to come up later in the story, is when you talk about an apartment. I think most people listening at one point, and maybe even now, have lived in an apartment. The apartments that I've lived in, you could hear a lot of things going on.
Oh, for sure.
Depending on whether you had people living above you or people next to you. This soundproof flooring and walls really kind of jumped out at me.
Money.
Yeah.
Built well.
Well, and it takes some money to get things like that. On October 11th, 1944, Georgette had lunch with her father's secretary. She checked in with the young women periodically. Given the fact that George was living in another state, the pair went shopping that afternoon. They also visited a beauty parlor. It was said that Georgette was her usual happy, spirited self. Later that day, she cashed a check for $175, and she paid $90 for an airline ticket to fly to El Paso. According to friends, she planned to fly to meet up with Jerry Brown, who she said was her boyfriend. After she got home, she changed for her shift. By 6:30 p.m., Georgette was parked in her car near the canteen. She was knitting to pass the time until her shift started. Her friend June arrived and jumped in the car with her to talk. June noticed Georgette wasn't in her usual high spirits. Instead, she was agitated and she seemed on edge. She even asked June to spend the night with her, but June couldn't stay over. And she assumed that Georgette was just anxious about flying off to see Jerry in Texas. It was said that June was one of the few people who knew about this trip that Georgette was about to take. I mentioned to Gibbs there were about 100 hostesses at this canteen.
Pretty popular.
It wasn't uncommon for these hostesses to find themselves the target of unwanted attention. During the girls' shift, June noticed one soldier in particular who was intent on monopolizing Georgette's attention. He kept cutting in on her dances, always wanting to jitterbug.
Just like you like that jitterbug.
Oh, you jumped in quicker than I could. I know you're a master jitterbugger. June later told police that Georgette was annoyed by this man's persistence, but she danced with him anyway to avoid causing trouble. She's a hostess. She's there to, show the guys a good time. According to the Los Angeles Herald Express, the man in question was in his late 20s, about 5'8", and had dark olive skin. Sometime between 10:30 and 11:30 p.m., Georgette and June left the canteen after finishing their shift. After they said their goodbyes, June watched as Georgette drove away alone. On the way home, Georgette picked up a sergeant named Gordon Adland, who was on his last furlough day and was hitchhiking after a night out. The pair chatted, with Georgette telling Gordon she was keen to get home as she was expecting a call from her boyfriend, who she was getting ready to travel to meet up with in Texas. Georgette dropped Gordon off around Sunset and Laurel Canyon Boulevards, and it's believed she arrived home soon after. She went upstairs, where she changed into her pajamas, and she went to bed. But it wasn't long after this, Gibbs, that Georgette was viciously raped, beaten, and asphyxiated by a man in her upstairs bedroom. The killer fled the scene, leaving the apartment's front door open. It was around 11:10 a.m. the next morning that caretakers Fred and Lulu Atwood arrived at the apartment to attend to the housekeeping. Fred noticed the door was open, so he went inside. But everything was quiet, and Georgette didn't respond to them calling out to announce their arrival. As the couple set out cleaning downstairs, Lulu heard some water dripping from upstairs. She made her way up to the bathroom, where she came across a ghastly sight. It was Georgette's lifeless body, lying face down in the bathtub, which was almost completely full of bloody water. She was wearing a pink pajama top. According to the San Francisco Examiner, Lulu ran downstairs, calling for Fred. It's thought that the faucet hadn't been running, but it also hadn't been turned off tightly. So the water had been dripping all night, which is what had almost filled the tub. Fred turned off the faucet completely, pulled out the plug, and ran to alert the police. Now, this is 1944. Today, we would say, don't touch anything.
Exactly.
Right? I don't think people knew that back then. Or even if they did, perchance, would it pop into your mind seeing what you're seeing? Or would you just act on instinct and that really wouldn't pop into your head at all?
Yeah, I don't know. I think maybe I would turn the water off completely. I don't know if I would pull a plug. I would just turn the water off and maybe, call the police or run to get the police.
When law enforcement arrived to assess the grim scene, they found Georgette's blood-spattered and torn pajama bottoms at the end of her bed. Near the door was her handbag. It was open, but it looked as though the contents hadn't been disturbed. According to the San Francisco Examiner, 2 ashtrays containing cigarette butts lay on the floor, even though Georgette didn't smoke. The carpet was damp. It was stained with blood, as though someone had tried to clean the stain with water and basically just smeared it in the process. According to the Daily News, a newspaper, a pencil, and Georgette's diary lay on the bed. The journal contained appointments and notations, as well as the names of numerous servicemen. And that would make sense, right? She had been doing this hostess job for a while now. My assumption, Gibbs, is she had met a lot of men, probably had gotten their information. Maybe she wrote to a lot of these men. Now, the bed itself appeared relatively undisturbed, but police theorized that Georgette had laid down at one point. According to the LA Times, a plane ticket to El Paso with an October 13th departure date lay on the dresser, as did Georgette's jewelry. Basically, the killer had left thousands of dollars worth of sterling silver, despite the fact that it was easily accessible in an unlocked trunk, and also a large roll of money. But $100 had been stolen from Georgette's purse, while this other cash remained untouched. So, I think as police, you got to look at this and figure out what it means. Obviously, there's been a murder.
Right.
You're really trying to figure out what the rest of it means. Okay. $100 was taken, but none of this expensive jewelry, nothing in the trunk, including a wad of cash or a roll of cash. So was it really a thief, or did someone just kind of take out $100 quickly so that it made it look as though it might have been a robbery?
I think you're right. I think it's somebody making it look like a robbery, but they didn't do a very good job.
Well, it would be different if, all of this jewelry and all of this cash was behind a safe, right? Locked up in a safe, and you had to work to get it. Didn't sound like that. Sounded like some of it was in plain view. Some of it was in an unlocked trunk. So if you don't take valuable stuff that's in plain view, that tells police something. And if you're not willing to open up some drawers, look in a trunk to see what type of valuables are inside, that tells you something as well. When Georgette's body was pulled from the tub, she was already in a state of rigor mortis. Blood was on the bathroom floor. It was also on the edge of the tub. A piece of fabric protruded from between the young woman's clenched teeth, but it couldn't be removed. The killer had turned off all the lights in the apartment before leaving. The exterior light bulb outside of Georgette's front door had been unscrewed, but left in the socket, basically disconnecting it from the power supply so that it would not switch on. This is something we've seen a lot of killers do throughout the years. And it was noted that this light, this bulb, was not accessible from a standing position, right? Somebody just couldn't reach up and unscrew it.
Yeah, they have to have a ladder, a stool, a chair, something to get to it.
Yeah, it was said it was about 8 feet above the ground. So, like you said, you got to have a ladder, a stool, a chair, something to get up there. There were chairs in the complex's common area, so it was thought the killer could have stood on one of those to unscrew the bulb. When the bulb was dusted, there were smudged fingerprints belonging to an unknown person. More unknown fingerprints were found around the apartment, including on tables, the bathtub, and on doors. Investigators found an empty string bean can and some melon rinds in the trash inside the kitchen. You know, Gibbs, what do U.S. News, PC Magazine, and Popular Science have in common? Well, they all rank Simply Safe Home Security as the best home security of 2021. In fact, U.S. News just named Simply Safe the best home security of 2022 as well. You've heard us talk about Simply Safe for years. I've been using them for over 4 years now. Simply Safe is less than $1 a day. I love the fact that it allows me to tailor my system exactly the way that I want it to, from sensors, and not just door and window sensors, but I have sensors for water, freeze, and carbon monoxide as well. And the cameras they've come out with are nothing short of amazing. And the fact that I can control everything from an app on my phone just blows me away. You can set the whole thing up in around 30 minutes, and it's a very simple system to use. Simply Safe doesn't do long-term contracts, and you can even try it for 60 days risk-free to see if you like it. You can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplysafe.com/TCAT. Go today and claim a free indoor security camera plus 20% off with interactive monitoring. Go to simplysafe.com/TCAT, TCAT. True Crime All the Time Unsolved is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you get a great rate on car insurance, even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side, so you choose a rate and coverages that work for you. So let's say you're interested in lowering your rate on your car insurance. Visit Progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and easy to compare. So that's all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you. You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future. More money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that could make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Hey folks, can we talk about health for a minute? Because there's nothing more important than taking care of yourself. Because if you're not feeling your best, you can't be your best. Sambucol helps you feel your best by supporting your immune system with premium black elderberry. Sambucol is the original black elderberry brand, so I know I'm getting immune support I can trust. I use Sambucol because I don't have time to miss work when I'm not feeling my best. These podcasts have to go out, so I take 1 or 2 Sambucol gummies every morning to help make sure I can keep doing what I need to do. And I love these gummies because they taste so good. They're like a little morning treat. I take them with my coffee to get my day started off right. They also have a ton of other formats to choose from, including syrups, drink powders, tablets, capsules, and more. They also have products for kids and babies as well. You can help support your entire family's immune systems with Sambucol. Get 15% off your next order of $9.99 or more at sambucolusa.com. Use code TCAT. That's 15% off your next order of $9.99 or more with the code TCAT. The Oldsmobile was gone, as were the car keys, but the vehicle was located later that day, parked about 12 miles away on San Pedro and East 25th Streets. The keys were still in the ignition, but the gas tank was empty. One witness told police she'd seen it parked there since around 7:30 a.m. The vehicle had also sustained recent damage to the front fender and to the grille, but it wasn't clear whether the killer had been in an accident or whether the damage had occurred prior. When the vehicle was dusted for prints, investigators recovered ones that matched those found at the apartment.
Just kind of promising.
It's promising. It's also, to me, Gibbs, fascinating when you go back to cases in the 1940s and find out what type of forensic work they were actually doing.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive without basically any technology at their disposal.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah, old school dusting and matching by hand, right? Somebody had to examine each one and look at some points or whatever and see whether it matched. There was no database. There were no computers. But that also meant that, a computer couldn't just spit out who the fingerprint belonged to. You had to find a person, get their fingerprint, and then try to match it.
Yeah.
Unless they had some fingerprints on cards around.
It'd take forever to go through each one.
It would. The autopsy revealed just how forcefully Georgette had fought for her life. We mentioned it, right? She had been viciously raped, and it was determined that the rape occurred on the floor of the bedroom. She sustained multiple bruises and abrasions all over her body from a savage beating inflicted by her killer's fists. On Georgette's right thigh were 6 distinct bruises, including fingernail marks and bruising indicating fingers and a thumb had forcefully held her down. It was very clear that whoever had attacked her was extremely strong.
Yeah.
Despite being found face down in the bathtub, there was no water in her lungs, so she hadn't drowned. Some sources say the cause of death was strangulation, but technically nothing had been placed around Georgette's neck. Instead, she'd been asphyxiated by having her airway restricted due to an obstruction forced into her throat. When the piece of fabric was finally removed from her mouth, it was determined to be a blood-stained 9-inch square bandage shoved about 4 inches down her throat.
Sounds brutal.
Absolutely brutal. A piece from the corner had already been torn off, as if the killer had tried to pull it out after Georgette died, but was unable to because of her clenched teeth. According to the San Francisco Examiner, the bandage had been folded into a diaper shape before being stuffed into Georgette's mouth, and the source of the blood on the bedroom carpet was somewhat of a mystery. It was said that Georgette had a bloody nose and a cut lip, but investigators also wondered whether the blood could have resulted from the rape. And I think after the autopsy, this kind of turned into the prevailing theory, because the autopsy noted that she sustained hemorrhaging to her vagina.
That's tough to hear.
Well, it's tough to hear. This whole thing, if you picture it in your mind, was extremely brutal. Every bit of it, from the beating to the rape to, shoving something down her throat so that eventually she just couldn't breathe. Georgette's stomach contents revealed that she ate string beans and meat about 90 minutes before she died. So this most likely accounted for the empty string bean can found in the trash. But according to LA Times, there was nothing to indicate Georgette cooked any type of substantial meat-based dish at home that night. So that was somewhat of a mystery.
Yeah, she had the beans, but
where'd the meat come from?
Exactly.
The police theorized that after Georgette was attacked and raped around 2:30 a.m., her killer moved her body into the bathroom. He placed her face down in the tub and turned the hot water on to the point where it filled the tub about 3/4 full. The killer made a crude attempt at cleaning the stain on the bedroom carpet, yet took the time to smoke at least one cigarette. I think, for everyone involved, Gibbs, this whole scene was just bizarre.
It sounds really bizarre.
Only days after her murder, Georgette's body was released and shipped back to New York City Following her funeral, she was buried in the family plot in the Bronx. One of the many things that the sheriff's department had to determine was how the killer had gained entry to the home, according to the Tuscaloosa News. Police believed Georgette had arrived home alone. As there was no sign of forced entry, investigators theorized her attacker was waiting inside the apartment after having disabled the exterior light bulb above the apartment door and then surprised Georgette while she was in bed. Detectives also considered a scenario where Georgette had already changed for bed and was surprised by an unexpected visitor. However, as they did their investigation, they learned that not only would Georgette have never answered the door in her pajamas, it was also unlikely the bottoms had been ripped off by her attacker. She was known to only sleep in her pajama top, according to the history blog, the LA Daily Mirror. When investigators spoke to other residents of the complex, most of them hadn't heard anything unusual in the hours on either side of Georgette's murder. And Gibbs, this is where it goes back to the soundproofing.
Yeah, it was really soundproof units. So not expecting anybody to hear anything at that point.
So this does make some sense. However, one neighbor told the sheriff's office that around 2:30 a.m., he woke up to the piercing sound of a woman screaming, "Stop, stop, you're killing me." But the neighbor didn't hear anything further, and assuming it was an argument that had stopped, he went back to sleep. Now, we don't know where this man lived in relation to Georgette, but it's a compelling witness account. The problem I have with it, Gibbs, is "stop, stop, you're killing me" does not sound in any way to me to be a simple argument.
No, that makes you think that you should probably investigate, or at least call someone to come investigate.
To investigate. Maybe not investigate yourself, but at the very least, maybe make a call to the police and say, "This is what I heard." Let them figure it out from there. I think the one thing that I would have a hard time doing after hearing that is just falling back to sleep.
Yeah.
And thinking, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. I got to get my sleep in.
And what does that person think after he finds out that this woman has been murdered? You got to beat yourself up maybe a little bit at that point, right? And think, wow, maybe I didn't do the right thing here. Not really trying to badmouth this guy, but investigators next spoke to everyone Georgette worked with, people mentioned in her diary and letters, and those at the Hollywood Canteen the night of her death. As police made their inquiries, it emerged that Georgette regularly offered up her living room couch as a place for servicemen to sleep for the night if they had nowhere else to go. This was also supported by a report in the San Francisco Examiner, which noted piles of letters found in Georgette's bedroom from over 20 servicemen thanking her for her hospitality.
Yeah, so she was a good person that tried to help out where she could.
Well, it sounds to me as though she was a good person. She was also very, very trusting. Some could make the argument too trusting. And we've talked about the fact that she was well off. Georgette was also known to pay for meals and nights out on the town with men she met at the canteen. She was also known to pick up hitchhiking soldiers and take them wherever they needed to go.
A little bit brave.
Yeah, brave, trusting. These are noble qualities. And I don't want people to think that I'm talking bad about her. You'd want everyone to think like this, right? Helping people out in need. That's a great thing. The problem is it's also a very scary thing.
Oh, sure.
When, you're a young woman alone, and we know that there are a number of monsters out there, Gibbs, specifically looking for targets like this, right? Women who are alone, women who are trusting enough to pick up a hitchhiker. Some of these things can be very, very dangerous. Now, I don't know if this was thought to be dangerous in the 1940s, though. You and I routinely talk about the dangers of hitchhiking in the 60s and especially into the 70s. 1944 was a much more trusting time. You would have to say that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think she was very trusting.
According to reporter Larry Harnish, Georgette even gave out copies of keys to her apartment, which apparently were never returned. Just another example of how trusting she was. Around 100 people who were at the canteen on the night in question were interviewed. Now, when you think about that, it's a lot of interviews. It seems almost like an impossible task. However, according to the San Francisco Gate, police were able to exclude large numbers of servicemen who were at the canteen simply by cross-checking whether they missed curfew. That makes a lot of sense, right? If there are records, assuming that those records are correct, and those servicemen were back at wherever, barracks or where they were supposed to be at a certain time, then it would be very unlikely for them to be able to sneak out and later murder Georgette.
You're exactly right. Not saying it couldn't be done, but it'd be very difficult.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever rule anything out completely. You and I have done too many cases where an alibi seems so solid, and then it later turns out that alibi is worthless. It just simply wasn't true. Bomba's mission is simple. Make the most comfortable clothes ever and match every item sold with an equal item donated. So when you buy Bombas, you're also giving to someone in need. Everything they make is amazing. Bombas design their socks, shirts, and underwear to be the clothes that you can't wait to put on every day. All their products are soft, seamless, tagless, and they all have a luxuriously cozy feel. Bombas has a ton of different sock options. There's something for everything you do. And they're known for their socks, but Bombas t-shirts are also outstanding, as are their underwear. They're made with this kind of barely there feel, almost makes you forget that they're even there, but in a good way. Socks, underwear, and t-shirts are the 3 most requested clothing items at homeless shelters. That's why Bombas donates one for every item you buy. Go to bombas.com/TCATU and get 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/TCATTU for 20% off. Bombas.com/TCATU. Hey Gibbs, it's no secret that I use CBD. My wife also uses CBD. It's something I've been talking about for, a few years now. We derive amazing benefits. And lately we've been using Johnny Apple CBD. They've got everything you need to relieve pain, to relieve stress, to give you a better night's sleep. JACBD.com has all the things you need and more. They have delicious CBD gummies, which are great for calming the mind and reducing anxiety. They've got nighttime gummies that are also infused with melatonin that'll help you get that great night's sleep. Better than NyQuil or something like Benadryl ever could. They have tinctures you can put in your morning coffee to reduce the jitters. They basically have everything. And you can save 20% off with the code TCAT, TCATT, at JACBD.com. Go to JACBD.com. It's 5 letters, JACBD.com. Use promo code TCAT to save 20% off store-wide. Support Johnny Apple CBD and support the show. A couple of days after Georgette's death, police received more information in a letter from Gordon Adlin. We mentioned Gordon, right? He was the sergeant Georgette had given a lift to on the night of her murder. Gordon saw a newspaper story on the slang, and he recognized Georgette as the young woman who'd given him a ride. When questioned by police, Gordon told them he'd been hitchhiking on Sunset Boulevard, and at around 11:30 p.m., Georgette picked him up west of Vine Street, which wasn't far from the canteen. They drove until Georgette dropped Gordon off on Laurel Canyon Boulevard. According to the LA Times and the San Francisco Examiner, Gordon saw the Oldsmobile turn right. If Georgette had continued in this direction, this would have taken her into the Hollywood Hills or the San Fernando Valley instead of returning home. So if Georgette was so keen to get home for this call that she was expecting from Jerry, as we talked about, why would she drive in the opposite direction? Right? A question that police had to try to answer. Then someone else came forward to assist. Corporal Cosmo Volpe, who had been training as a mechanic at the Lockheed plant in Burbank and had danced with Georgette several times throughout the night, realized that he was the dark-complexioned serviceman police were looking for after reading newspaper reports. Cosmo told detectives that Georgette was in high spirits that night. He denied making her feel uncomfortable and said he left the canteen around 10 p.m. with another friend, a sergeant who had accompanied him. Cosmo's alibi checked out as he and his companion hitched back to their base, arriving at 11:30 p.m.
Well, it takes him off the list.
Yeah, it takes him off the list if, the alibi is real. The one thing that really jumps out at me about both Cosmo and Gordon is that they came forward willingly and kind of, I don't want to say put themselves or inserted themselves into the investigation, but they kind of did.
Sure.
They willingly came forward. So either, that tells you that they did so because they had nothing to hide,
right?
Or they did it because they were trying to play games with police and, that gave them a thrill. I kind of lean towards the former on both of them.
Yeah, just stand-up guys, right?
Yeah, seems like it. I mean, as far as I know, they weren't even looking for Gordon.
Yeah, I think he just voluntarily came forward.
He just read about it and said, hey, she picked me up that night.
Yeah, I think I can help.
At a coroner's inquest almost 2 weeks after the murder, compelling information emerged which shed light on what happened inside the apartment after Georgette arrived home. The caretakers, Fred and Lulu, who lived in the apartment below Georgette, didn't know the young woman all that well, and they really didn't know anyone in her life besides her family. Fred told the inquest that he woke up around midnight on the night in question to hear the sound of a woman's high heels, as if someone were walking around Georgette's kitchen. What he heard next was the sound of a loud crash, as if something large and metallic had fallen to the floor. Fred said he couldn't hear the sounds of anyone else in the apartment. Lulu told the inquest that the couple didn't have a clock in their bedroom, so they didn't know exactly what time this happened, but they didn't hear anything else. So they didn't check on Georgette and they went back to sleep. Now, this was interesting information given the fact that the complex was soundproofed. We talked about that. Well, obviously, it's not completely soundproof.
Right.
You can hear if somebody drops a large metal object on the floor. Can you completely soundproof that? Probably not. Now, I kind of contrast this with the other neighbor, and to me, these are two completely different things.
Yeah, if you got someone screaming, stop, 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 someone's trying to kill me, there's a sense of urgency that you might want to get a hold of the police.
Well, as opposed to hearing maybe what you think are high heels and someone dropping a pot.
Right.
Okay, you don't call the police for that.
No.
There's no reason to. Go back to bed. So I do see those as completely different situations. Much of the information that remains available on the investigation is thanks to the work of former LA Times reporter Larry Harnish, who has done an extensive deep dive into Georgette's murder on his blog, The Daily Mirror, a site which is dedicated to the history of Los Angeles. We talked about that bulb from the exterior light outside the apartment that was taken for fingerprint analysis. But unfortunately, the prints recovered from the bulb were not a match for any held on file with the FBI or even with the armed forces. Meanwhile, investigators were working to determine the origin of the bandage stuffed down Georgette's throat. According to the Daily News, the fabric was identified as crepe tetra, generally used for treating sprains. This was only sold in New York and LA. So it wasn't something that was readily available just anywhere, but the size of the specific bandage roll, which killed Georgette, hadn't been available in the U.S. for over 20 years and had to be imported from Europe. So, all right, a little bizarre.
Yeah.
I think what was even more bizarre was that neither the U.S. Army nor the Navy had ever used this type of bandage.
So if you don't have the Navy or Army using it, you don't have any Navy Army personnel fingerprints on file to match what was found on the light bulb. Sounds like maybe there's no suspect that's in the Navy or the
No
Army.
connection, maybe to the armed services. I mean, Gibbs, you'd have to say it's a strange murder weapon, right? To stuff some type of bandage down someone's throat,
Sure,
essentially cutting off their air supply. But then you factor in, this nugget that it's not been available in the U.S. for over 20 years. What does that mean? Is this something old that someone has had laying around for over 20 years? I don't know. There are a lot of bizarre factors to this case. There's just no doubt about it. Investigators also looked into other similar violent crimes against women committed in L.A. around the same time, over a month after Georgette's murder. 31-year-old double murderer Otto Wilson was questioned after he killed 2 women in separate hotels in downtown LA that November. But there was nothing to suggest that he was responsible for Georgette's murder. A month later, someone else came to the attention of the police. According to the Racine Journal-Times, in December 1944, a former soldier came forward to the FBI claiming he was the killer. 22-year-old John Sumter told investigators he'd met Georgette on the street. After she invited him home, he strangled her. But when Sumter couldn't explain the finer details of how this was all supposed to have happened, his story quickly fell apart. According to the LA Times, he soon admitted to making up the entire thing because he wanted to end his own life, but he was too scared. So he hoped that by telling this story, the state would execute him if he admitted to a capital crime. And this was just the start of a long line of people who contacted detectives with off-the-wall theories. In September 1945, almost a year after the murder, a teen girl contacted police saying she'd found a letter alleging the killer had been posted to Okinawa in Japan following the murder, and the killing was divine retribution. Unfortunately, we don't know where this letter was found, but police eventually dismissed it as a hoax. And this is something that we talk about in Unsolved Cases, Gibbs. You have all of these things coming out.
right.
Each time one does, and it's proven to be a hoax or police discount it, it has to be distressing for the victim's family. These had to have been tough on Georgette's family. It's essentially as though their hopes are dashed time and time again. Every time you get a new lead, and then that new lead is eliminated. The Hollywood Canteen closed for good around Thanksgiving of 1945. Obviously, as we know, Gibbs, the war ended. The building was demolished in 1966. Georgette's father, George, passed away at the age of 76 in 1961. His wife, Thelma, died in 1997 at the age of 95. Over the years, there were a number of famous actresses who lived in Georgette's apartment. According to U.S. Weekly, these included Marilyn Monroe during the 1950s, Dorothy Dandridge, who died by suicide in the apartment in 1965, and Lindsay Lohan, who purchased the apartment in 2007.
Some interesting facts.
Yeah. No, and obviously some pretty famous people. Like so many other cases, this is one where there seemed to be a decent number of suspects. But unfortunately, really no one stood out more than any other. And I think this is mainly due to the fact that people were eliminated one by one. The case remains a mystery to this day. Many people still speculate on how Georgette's killer gained access to the apartment. Was he waiting on her when she got home? Or for some reason, did she allow this person access or entry to the apartment after she got home? People don't know. And how do you tell? I don't think there is any way to tell.
And I think especially at this time, right? This far out, how do you ever determine that? If they couldn't determine it back then, how are you going to determine it now?
There's conjecture about the murder weapon itself. We don't know if the killer had the bandage on him when he entered the apartment or if he found it inside the apartment and it maybe belonged to Georgette. It does appear perhaps the murder wasn't premeditated. This is based on, the fact that the killer tried to clean up the blood on the carpet, tried to remove the bandage from Georgette's mouth. It could be argued that he tried to stage the scene, making it appear as though she had either slipped and fallen into the bathtub after hitting her head, or maybe, accidentally drowning. We talked about a lot of people being eliminated, right? Gordon, Cosmo Volpe. We know Jerry Brown was cleared because he was on base in Texas on the night of the murder. It couldn't have been him. There were some similar crimes committed either in LA or around the area at the time. Police couldn't link Otto Wilson. They couldn't link John Sumter. Other violent offenders who came to the attention of detectives included 20-year-old Robert White, who forced a gag down the throat of a 65-year-old woman and was in LA at the time that Georgette was killed. Then there's 23-year-old Kenneth Raymond, alleged to have abducted and murdered a 5-year-old girl from LA in 1946. But again, there's nothing solid to suggest either man was responsible for Georgette's murder beyond these circumstantial aspects. I think there's some Gibbs that have a tiny bit of suspicion around Fred and Lulu, the caretakers. We don't know if they were really ever treated as persons of interest. We talked about it, right? They were the first to discover Georgette's body. But according to the LA Daily Mirror, they gave different accounts of finding her in the bathtub. Fred told police the couple were both in the apartment at the same time, while Lulu's account had her running to go get Fred. So, we're almost 80 years on. I don't know that we'll ever know what really happened. One final theory worth covering here, which is popular amongst some armchair detectives, is the alleged link between Georgette's murder and that of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. In January 1947, we covered this case, the Black Dahlia murder, in episodes 76 and 77 of Unsolved. So go back and check those out if you haven't already. If you're familiar with the case, you'll know that the prime suspect in Elizabeth's murder is George Hodel. But there's nothing to suggest that Georgette ever knew or had contact with the doctor, or that she and Elizabeth ever knew each other or even crossed paths.
But it adds that mystery, right? That maybe.
Well, I think it's natural. Anytime you have, kind of famous cases that happen in the same area, not that far apart, to try to link them. I think that's just very natural. But when you can't find any type of link, that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
We mentioned it, right? The Hollywood Canteen closed in 1945, over a year after Georgette was murdered, and Elizabeth didn't arrive in LA until mid-1946. So I think that right there shows you that they couldn't have crossed paths. They couldn't have known each other. Aside from the murders occurring in LA within a few years of each other, there's really nothing to connect these cases. But that doesn't stop people from trying.
No, they're trying to connect them.
Georgette's older sister, Connie, died in 2014 at the age of 93. Just like George and Thelma, she never lived to find out who killed her sister or why. So Gibbs, as we wrap up this case, it was a case that received quite a bit of media attention. It was a pretty high profile case.
Yeah, it really was.
Back in the day. You had an heiress, a socialite. Anytime you have a wealthy individual, a young woman killed in such a brutal fashion, it's going to get some attention. But despite that, over the years, there's really been no meaningful developments. And as we talk about a lot, right? The more time passes, there are some theories that the less likely the case will be solved. Now, the one thing I think that would change that is if there was some type of DNA evidence. I don't know that there is at all.
Right.
They had fingerprints. That's the one thing that we did talk about. The thing about fingerprints in an 80-year-old case, what is the likelihood that all of a sudden a person's fingerprints are going to show up in a database?
Very unlikely.
Very unlikely, given the fact that the perpetrator is most likely deceased.
Right.
So nobody's taken their fingerprints, as far as I know.
If they haven't been found by this time, I really doubt that they're going to pop up in the database.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like we talk about all the time, so many advancements in DNA, if they had anything that could provide a DNA sample, well, then we could maybe have a little bit more hope.
Right.
I can't imagine that even if they had something back then, after 80 years, they could even get a viable sample. I think the odds would be pretty low, but you never know.
No, you don't.
We've seen some pretty miraculous things happen. But really, when you think about it, in the absence of any major breakthroughs, could there be a deathbed confession? We talk about that in a lot of cases. I highly doubt it here.
Yeah, I think this case is too old.
Yeah, but who is going to make a deathbed confession at this point? If you think about it, even if the killer was 19 or 20, they're almost 100 years old now.
Yeah.
If they were still alive. And who would they have told that would have been that much younger than them?
Right.
Just the chances of anybody really connected to this case still being alive is just very, very slim.
Interesting case, though.
It is an interesting case. I think what the passage of time does not do, it doesn't stop the amateur sleuths, right? There's still kind of a fervor to try to solve these types of cases. Theories will be put forward. They'll be discussed. I think all of that is a good thing. Historians still discuss this case. So, I never say never. We talk about that all the time. I do think it's doubtful, but never say never. But Gibbs, that's it for our case on the unsolved murder of Georgette Bauerdorf. We got some voicemails. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Oh my gosh, I totally got it. Okay, I just Facebook Gibby because I'm kind of pro Gibby because he's I'm sorry, I kind of have a crush on him, but whatever. Anyway, you guys are the best. I look forward to your podcast every week. You guys are just wonderful. I am also I'm a piano teacher. I have my own little small business, and I love what you guys do. This probably makes no sense. I've had some wine tonight. Here we are. I have a total crush on Gibby, and so I'm pro Gibby. Sorry, Mike, I know you're married. That's just the way that it is. Okay, this probably won't make it on the show because I'm being a crazy lady. But okay, have a good night. Keep your own time ticking. Okay, good night.
No, that's definitely making it on the air because it cracked me up. The whole thing.
Yeah, that's great.
It's you get a little vino, you hit the Facebook, and then you decide you want to make a voicemail and profess your love for Gibby. That's getting on the air.
There you go.
That's just all there is to it.
That's how it happens.
That's how it happens. Whatever makes me laugh or, I find inspirational, that's going to make the air.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name is Gabrielle, and I'm calling you from sunny California, where I'm stuck in traffic. But I originally came from Tennessee, which is where I started listening to your show. And I just wanted to tell you how much I love it. I even get my youngest son to listen to it with me. He's 17 and is also just completely in love with it and how funny you guys are and what chemistry you guys have. And Mike, just a shout out to you, your career leap over the last couple of years inspired me to take my own career leap, which is why I'm across the country living my best life. I hope you guys are living your best life too. So have a great day. Keep your own time ticking.
So that was awesome. That made the air because it was very inspirational.
It was inspirational.
So she's living her best life. We love to hear that. You and I are trying to live our best lives, and hopefully everybody out there is. Now she's driving around California paying $6-7 for gas. So that hurts a little bit right now.
But hey,
on the news, they always show California because
I know.
California has the highest gas prices.
yeah, in the States for sure.
I'm like, oh my gosh! I filled up my truck the other day, and at $4, I thought I was going to have to rob my daughter's piggy bank. I
Yeah.
can't imagine $6.50, $7.
It's a lot.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Rhonda in Texas. I think there was another Rhonda that called in and discussed how she moved her car seat back when she gets out of the car. And I've thought the same thing about that they could not use that as evidence or whatever, because my car automatically scoots the seat back when I get out of the car. And then when I get back in, it scoots it back to the original position. So, yeah, I don't think they can use that anymore. But I also find it curious that y'all's area code is 937 in Ohio. I'm in Texas, and mine's 936. I'm not sure how they assign those numbers. Just found that interesting. Stay safe and keep your own time ticking. Bye.
Yeah, I don't know if they know how they assign those numbers.
I don't either. Eeny, miny, mo. I'm not sure. Now, Rhonda called in to tell us she has a very cool car.
Yeah.
And I know you probably have that in your car as well, being the high roller that you are.
Absolutely.
Where the seat just automatically adjusts.
Yeah.
I will say my wife has that, but you have to press a button. There's 2 buttons.
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Called memory buttons.
Memory buttons. One is where her seat settings are, and one is where my settings are.
Right.
But I've never seen one that just automatically adjusts when you get in. That's fancy schmancy.
That's really fancy.
All right, buddy. That's it. We're out.
All right, man.
That's it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So from Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.
Watch Yellowstone for free on Pluto TV. All this weekend, Pluto TV is streaming a marathon of seasons 1 to 3 of Yellowstone, the show The Wrap calls a smash hit series. Pluto TV also has hundreds of channels and thousands of movies and TV shows like Mission Impossible 3, Gladiator, CSI, and more. Absolutely free. So download the free Pluto TV streaming app and watch Yellowstone seasons 1 to 3 free.